Welcome to another episode of the Mindset Athlete Podcast with me, James Roberts, transformational coach, two-time Paralympian, and TEDx speaker. I have another awesome episode for you today, so let's get straight into it. And on today's show, I've got a special guest, Marvin Ambrosius. So welcome onto the show, Marvin.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, James. I really appreciate it, man.
It's my absolute pleasure. Obviously, you're well known for being on Sky Sports and Sky's Fit in 5. But what a lot of people don't know about you is your history before you went into fitness. And obviously, you and I have kind of gone backwards and forwards because of our ambassador roles within Link Sport. And I'll go into that in a little bit of detail. Or we can talk about that, obviously, as we progress into the episode. But obviously, a lot of people don't know you were a former basketball player. So talk to us about those early days.
Yeah, well, I was actually born into a life of basketball because my father played. So from the age of, since I can remember, I knew how to dribble a basketball. So I can't tell you the day I got taught how to dribble a basketball. I look at pictures of myself at 5 and I'm putting the ball between my legs and around my back at 5. So it's kind of one of those things where I'd go to my dad's games, but I'd always be playing basketball on the sideline. So it's kind of just an unconscious thing for me to be able to do. But over the years, my dad was still playing and he was teaching me how to play. And about 7 years old, that was when my club, Brixton Top Cats, they started their first ever kids team, which was under 12s. And I was playing, we were going to training every Wednesday. And it just became synonymous with my life as a routine that every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, you play basketball. Didn't know what it was going to be. We had loads of NBA, NCAA tapes at home. So I was always watching it, trying to mimic whoever I could feel like I could be like. To a lot of people, they think it was Michael Jordan. But to me, it was a lot of other players that I was looking up at the time. Larry Johnson was someone that I looked up to when I was younger. And I'm watching it now and then I'm playing. And then the years kind of sped up real quick because by the time I was like 9, that was when I'd realized I wasn't just good at basketball. I was probably the best in the country at my age at that point. And that was only because by accident, I went to a basketball tournament with my dad to watch his team, Brixton Top Cats, playing a residential tournament in Hackney. And it was in East London. And what happened was one of the teams, the East London Royals, coached by the great Humph Long, he basically only had 6 players. He knew I played basketball. So he said to my dad, do you mind if my son, do you mind if your son plays with us? He doesn't have to play in the games. We just need another player. And my dad said, hey, you can play him if you want. You won't be disappointed. And funniest story ever, not only did we play this tournament, I end up averaging between 7 to 10 points a game against 19-year-olds. I'm 9 years old. So when you put it, it's crazy. But I look back at it now, I'm like, I'd love to see this on tape, but no one has it. No one had a video recorder. But we ended up playing Brixton Top Cats in the final. And my dad, mixed emotions is not the word. Like, he's so proud, but at the same time, he's like, we're about to lose because my son played for that other team. I literally, everything my dad taught me, I did in the game against my father. And he said, anybody who's right-handed, send them left. Kept on doing it. One of his players kept on, literally, the ball was coming off of his foot all the time. And because of that reason, I just kept playing. And I ended up shooting like 2 free throws at the end of the game with like a minute to go that put us up by 2. And then I got subbed out and we won the tournament. And that was when I was hooked. And from that point on, that was when I was on the England radar from growing up. So every year I was going to camps. I went to my first basketball camp when I was 13 in America, to the 5-star camp. Still whilst playing for Brixton, we were like the number 1 team in the country. And then it was us against London Towers, East London Royals. It was like we were all rivals. And we kind of, at 13 actually, I tried out at Lilleshall for the England under 15s team. And I was the youngest player to make it in the tournament because you do an all nations, as you know, an all nations tournament. So it's not just, it's the best of London against the best of all parts of England to make the England squad. And at the time, you don't give yourself a pat on the back because you're just a kid. But like now I look back at it and I'm going, okay, so I was 13 and I was that good to be making an under 15s team but at 13 in a 2 guard position. I wasn't very big. I was about 5'7", but because I could shoot, I was probably, I'd say, 75% from the 3-point line. Like, and that's not even exaggeration. Like, people knew, don't leave me open, because that was my thing. But I had a lot of basketball smarts and fundamentals because my dad and my coach Jimmy Rogers constantly was drilling fundamentals into me. But I also had a good read for the game. And then, like, moving forward, like passing through time, like maybe a few years later, I got to about 16 and I was still playing for England, under 18, under 19s now. So like at 16, I was playing for the under 19. So I always was like way ahead of my age group. But I had some pitfalls, which stopped me from playing. I had about 3 ankle injuries, fractures in my right ankle, 2 in my left. And I was constantly within a 2-year period, probably on crutches twice a year, 3 times a year, and having to recover all the time. So, and that happened for 3 years straight, but not realizing what that was doing. It was psychologically damaging my road to success. Because what it was doing, you got to remember, being an adolescent, people don't realize your brain's already all over the place anyway, about what you're going to do with your life. And people were telling me, oh, you can't play basketball anymore. What else can you do? And that was pretty much a reoccurring theme of, what are you going to do if you don't have basketball? So I still paid no mind to it. And when I got to around 17, I was playing the best level basketball I could ever think to date. I was in shape, the best I was ever in shape. I was fast. I had my athleticism was better. I was playing on the men's team from the age of 14. I played my first men's game when I was 14 in Division 2, and I just got used to playing against better players. So I knew the only way to get better was to play against older players. But by the time I got to 17, I was at a level where I was an older player according to basketball. As you know, people like Kobe Bryant went to the NBA when he was 17. So at 17, I was nowhere near that level. So I knew in my mind, I got a lot of work to do because I'm nowhere near the NBA standard. And that year, when I got to my best, hit my knee, cartilage popped from my knee, couldn't play for 10 months. And you know, as an athlete yourself, James, you know, we know the pains of trying to be one thing and something that you're helpless to it. So I was helpless to that situation and became down. It really put me down. But at the same time, I'm quite an uplifting person. So I try to look at the positives and think, maybe my body needs a break. I'll try something else. So I started doing songwriting. My sister convinced me to start writing songs with her and started singing. Really enjoying that process. It was a lot of fun going to studios all the time. And then, lo and behold, 10 months down the line, got my operation on my knee, came back better than ever. Like, took me about 3-4 months to get back to where I was. Still, meantime, still doing recording music as well, finished studying. And I then went to America to a school. I went to visit some schools because I wanted to go to high school to finish out my last year, so I could then go to college and be recruited and scouted. Because I was scouted by 2 colleges in Buffalo, New York. One was called Canisius, which was a Division 3 school actually, but they had a 20,000 seater stadium. Like, their basketball program was out of this world, and that was from scouts that came to my games. And I just wanted to get to the point where I could go to school and get there. So I went to America, went to a few schools, and there was some transcript problems to where none of the schools were allowing me to attend because there was something wrong with my transcripts. So I had to come back to the UK. And when I got back, I was too late to join any colleges, universities, or any programs of education. So I had to get a job. So I ended up working a full-time job in JD Sports. So I was working like 4 days a week, nearly 5 days a week. And I was like taking days off here and there. And I was playing basketball still, but I had a chip on my shoulder because I thought I had leaving parties. I was gone. I thought I was never coming back. That was it. America, this was the goal. This is where I wanted to be. And then all of a sudden it's finished. So got back, had that chip on my shoulder, played the best basketball, but then it happened again. The ankle went. And when that ankle went, the trigger just went off. And I just decided that I don't think this is for me anymore. And I literally turned my back on basketball. I have to say it like that because I look back at it and I'm a very all or nothing person. I can't be an athlete but not do what athletes need to do to be the best. So I thought I'm not going to be one of those people that say, "Oh, I'm going to go to a scrimmage or I'll go play ball here and there." I'm like, "No, if I'm playing ball, I'm playing ball. That's what I'm doing." And because that was taken away from me again, I just decided I can't give something loyalty that I'd given my whole life to at the time. Only 17. It's not a very long life, but it's long enough. It's all I know at the time. So I decided to just turn around and say, I'm not doing that anymore, but I'm going to help other people. Started coaching in High Barnet Bulldogs. I was coaching them for about, I think it was 1 season, and they literally couldn't even do a layup, like to even touch it. They couldn't do the basic fundamentals, but I got them to the point where I got them to a semi-final. And to other people, when they lost, they felt really sad. But to me, I'm like, you guys had never even played before, but I got you to a point of being able to do all the principles of basketball I learned. I got them to a point of being able to compete against good teams by making good teams make mistakes and give them the fundamentals to make them make mistakes. So, and then after that year, I just said, that's it. I'm doing music full time now. Got my passion for music. I knew music couldn't let me down. And then I signed a publishing contract in 1999. And then music became my full-time profession. Probably for about 6-7 years. That's all I did was music. Wrote some good songs, worked in a lot of places, went to the US a lot, went to Europe a lot. And during that time, it was great. Basketball wasn't even thought, it was an afterthought. But the crazy thing about that was I was playing basketball those years, never caring about what I ate, what my diet was like, nothing. But when I stopped playing basketball, I continued eating exactly the same. You pretty much know what happened. Everyone's got a different body type. And I say this all the time. My body type is whatever I do is how I look. So if I'm eating badly and I'm not working out, I put on about 6 stone in less than 2 years. And it wasn't that I was trying to put weight on. That's just what went on from me living a normal base life. But I went from all exercise to no exercise. And in 2007, music went a bit quiet. I just decided to say, I'm going to get a part-time job and do music as well. Did that. And then again, basketball was an afterthought. That's pretty much it for the basketball world.
So how do you transition then from music to what you do now then?
Well, that was quite a funny one because I still do music now. It's just not as prominent as I would advertise it, if that makes sense. It's actually part of my, I'd say it's part of my DNA of just something that I can put it down and do it any day. Someone could call me and say, "Oh, I've got an idea for this song. Can you write?" And I can write it straight away because I did it for so many years. It's like basketball. If someone said to me, "Could you coach a game?" I could coach a game. I wouldn't need to prep for it. I just know how to do it. Can you run a basketball session? It's a transferable skill. Yeah, I can do it. It's just something you don't need to think about. And that was what music was. So I just transitioned from the basketball to music and music to fitness because in music became unloyal. And you can see where I'm going this is a trait of Marv. Like I've realized the moment something's not loyal to me and in my servings to it, I say goodbye to it. And that's what happened with music. I had to put it down for a bit and allow myself to just try and be normal for once, not be creative and just be someone that goes, you know what? I don't do anything on the side. I work for this company. I work in sales and marketing and that's it. And I tried to be that guy it took me about maybe 2 years. I was that guy. And then I got sucked back into music. And whilst I got sucked back into music, I found the gym and the work gym. It was it was a tiny gym. It was probably the size of like a house, but it had everything in there that you needed to get things done. However, my only conditioning that I ever grew up with was basketball training. So I only know how to train in a high intense way. So I was training, but it was exhausting. It was off-putting. I was just like, this isn't working for me. I can't do what I used to do. So I started doing weights. So not only did I have weight on me, I started packing on muscle on top of the weight. So I ended up looking like a linebacker. And I was just like, this isn't the look I want. And people were saying, whoa, are you playing for sports? Are you playing American football? I was like, no, I'm just going to the gym, not realizing that my body, it likes to lift weights and it builds muscle quite quickly. But if you're eating badly, 2 and 2 make 4 on that one, it's going to get bigger. So I just got bigger and bigger. So I decided to stop doing weights. A trainer there said to me, like, what do you want to achieve? And I said, I just want to lose weight, just maintain. And he gave me 4 pointers and said, do this, 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 and this. And if you're consistent, you'll lose weight. I did it. And then I lost a little bit, didn't lose too much. And then I said, you know what? I'm going to sit down and I'm going to write myself a program. I'm going to do something. And I found my own short workouts, but I found that through actually doing another workout, which was I started doing Insanity. Remember Insanity with Sean T? I started doing Insanity. Now, I started doing it during my lunch breaks because you could do 20 minutes or 30 or 40 minutes. So I just did that every day, and it built up my fitness level to a point where I was fit, but I didn't lose any weight. I didn't lose any weight. I just got really fit. And I was thinking, like, why am I not losing any weight? So I had to revisit and look at my nutrition. So I revisited my nutrition, clean that completely up. And then I said, and all of a sudden my lunch breaks got cut really short. So I had to make my own short workouts up. And that was basically essentially how my Fit in 5 brand was created. I said, I'm going to do quick spurts of 30 seconds, 10 exercises, and I'm going to do as many rounds as I can. And that was pretty much how that was born. And then my wife said to me, you should just do 5-minute workouts and call them Fit in 5. And I was like, oh my God, you're a genius. So it's essentially my wife that really came up with the name and like the concept. And I just kept it going. And then all of a sudden I was 2 stone lighter, 3 stone lighter, 4 stone lighter, 5 stone lighter. And then next thing you know, I'm a completely different dude. I'm back to what I looked like when I was 17. And everybody's like, oh my God, look at Marv now. But there's a whole bunch of people that met me years prior that knew me as the size that I was again. So it was like the new people was like, you've lost all this weight. But the people that I've known for years were like, you look like what you look like when we knew you when we were younger. So it was like, but I was like, well, I'm still young. I'm only like 30. So I'm thinking to myself, like, how is it I'm 30 and I'm looking like I'm 17? But then I shouldn't have been this big in the first place. And that was when I kind of started to create a following where people at work started coming to my lunch classes, but they weren't classes. It was just me in a room working out to my own music. But then people said, can I join in? And I was like, yeah, cool. I'm not a trainer, but yeah, join in. And they started joining in with me. And next thing you know, it became a thing. Let's all work out with Marvin at lunchtime. And next thing you know, 5 turned to 10, 10 turned to 15. And then it turned into the guy that was running the gym saying to me, I think you might need to start teaching classes officially here. Do you want to do classes on your lunch break? And I went, yeah, that sounds pretty good. He says, well, you need to get a level 2 qualification to do that first. I went, oh, okay. So I was like, cool. One of my really good friends, he's actually a teacher. He runs level 2, level 3. Spoke to him and he was like, my courses are on these dates. Are you going to come? Went to it, did my level 2, loved it. I learned everything that it was like all the experiments that I put my body through over years. I learned in like a 6-month span that would have been so less painful if I had that information, which is quite funny how a lot of people don't source it. But just going on that course taught me everything I should have known to not have to go yo-yo dieting, know the principles of exercise, how to make sure that I take care of my body, all those things. And did the course. And then I found out there was an Insanity instructor. You could become an instructor. And it was the first wave. Like no one was an instructor yet. So I went on the first course to be an Insanity instructor. So I was one of the first Insanity instructors in the country. And I started teaching that on my lunch breaks. And it was an addiction. I loved doing it. It wasn't about the money. It was just, I realized that I didn't love fitness. I loved motivating other people. And I loved other people getting successful. So I loved someone telling me, oh my God, I lost this much weight. Wow. Like I've never felt better. And I was addicted to that. It became less about me, but more about other people. And then and that's when I found my calling. It was about, I think my calling was to make other people better and use the flaws and pitfalls of my life in what I'd fell down and helped people get up quicker. So all those diets and all those things I did, all the yo-yoing, trying to get weight up, lose weight, I was like, oh, I can actually stop people from going through this, and I can get them straight to the right road on the right track and become the best version of themselves.
So if you had to compare, obviously the motivate, and this is obviously a question I get posed periodically as well, but I'll pose it to you instead, Marvin. If you had to compare the motivation or inspiration that sports allowed you to showcase your skills to other people versus what you do now, which do you think has an overall more of an impact? Obviously, I know the answer, but if you put it into your own words.
Yeah, I would say that the transferable skills of being motivated to motivate others is definitely the one. Like, because you can't teach motivation. I've realized now, like, it's not. Some people become personal trainers, but they become personal trainers. It's a job spec, but they're not motivators. And that to me is that's a sub part of your job that you can't be taught. Like, you can have the bells and whistles, you could have a gym, you could have the programs, but can you get me out of my bed and get me in that gym and make me feel good about myself? Like, there's a whole different parameter to it. And that's where doing something to get something back, but something bigger than just the result of fitness. And you're right, it definitely stemmed from the motivation from being an athlete and from being coached by great coaches.
Why do you say motivation can't be learned?
Because I've realized now, I've met a lot of trainers, and some people talk the motivation because they're using the spiel, if that makes sense. But there's an emotional attachment to motivation. When I'm telling somebody about, you should do this because of this, this will work for you, I come back with an example of a personal experience. Now, if you've never been overweight, or you've never struggled with any part of a body image that's to do with your weight or training, or any kind of ability or disability, anything, you can't talk from the experience that I need for it to really cognitively understand from myself. And that's where I realized the power lied in my pitfalls, being 6 stone heavier. You can see that it worked. You can see me getting a donut from a counter. You can see me having a slice of pizza. But the fact of the matter is, you see me having it, but then you also see me saying, yeah, and I'm definitely going to go into the gym after this, but this is just for today, not for the week. And teaching a lifestyle rather than a diet, because that's the problem. I'd been on diets for way too long.
And obviously, you and I were talking off air about you obviously you're getting up in the age. I'm not far. I'm only a few years behind yourself, so I can relate to what you're talking about. So you're talking about obviously bringing in up and coming coaches, as I'll put it, because that's what it is, and giving them a foothold within your brand. And what I liked about what you were saying, Marvin, was you want to not indoctrinate them into your brand, and thus you work for me, so I can be able to either go off and do something else, or focus, taking a backward step. Obviously, we'll call the person to be unnamed. We'll use Harry Potter as the movie to but most people in Britain will know what I'm talking about, especially the professionals industry that we work in. They know exactly what I'm talking about. But why did you take the stance to be able to give them a stepping stone, and then obviously being able to once they become well known within your brand, to kind of go off on their own?
Well, one thing I'd learned about working for companies, like I'd worked for Sky TV for 10 years. And the one thing that I learned was about empowerment. Now, if I'm doing a great job, I've always said, you don't need a pay rise to be told you're having doing a great job. What you need is someone to tell you you're doing a great job. Really simple. And what you need to do is give them something as a tool, or something, like it could be anything, a reward badge, it could be an email, and that person automatically gets uplifted and they move on. So I've basically indoctrinated that from the fact that I was like, wait a second, I'm building my brand. I've had so many no's. I've had more no's than yeses than all the meetings I've ever been to. And I'm prepared for the no's because they grow me. No's grow you. Yeses yeses ruin your life. If you get yeses from day one, the day you get a no, you're pretty much you're in the worst place ever. But if you've been told no most of the time, it means that when you get the yeses, it's a massive win. So I wanted to make sure that anybody that I was bringing into my brand, they had the understanding that this isn't about you working for me. This is about you building content that people know about you as a person and as a brand. I want that person to use their story, their philosophies, to let people know that they can become the best version of themselves because they're great at what they do. Like my brand is just basically an umbrella to bring other people up, because not everybody wants to help anybody. Unfortunately, people want to be the guy. Like there's enough room for everyone to be the guy, the girl, to be anything. It's just about basically empowering others to do more. And if somebody says to me, "Oh, my brand's gone great now, I'm going to do it myself," I'm like, "Cool. How can I help you do that?" Because we're all part of the same journey. We all want to be happy. And if you're not happy where you are, you have to move on from that. But a happy employee is an employee for life.
And is that why you've kind of branched off into what I mentioned at the top of the show, of obviously you and I are ambassadors for Link Sport, as well as many other athletes that they brought on board. Do you think that is, and I don't want to put words into your mouth as to why I got onboarded or involved, should I say? I'm not use a business term, but I know what I meant by it. What was it that attracted you to that app and that organization?
The moment you said the words bringing communities together, I read everything, because when somebody says that, I'm like, well, what's your meaning of that? And they said, no, helping people basically being holding themselves accountable, but you're bringing other people in that wouldn't be able to do so. So instead of having a workout buddy, you've now created a community within a community of workout buddies on a bigger scale. And I just thought, that's genius. And I just thought, this is the best way to get people moving, whether that's just taking steps, whether that's just giving someone a nudge to say, I'm about to do a workout now. I didn't feel like it, but you know what? I feel so much better for it. When you hear that, have you ever heard anybody tell you, oh, I just did a workout, but I feel worse for it now, I shouldn't have done that? Very rare. Very rare. You'll hear athletes say that sometimes because they know that they're preparing for something and they needed to recover, and they now know they're not going to recover properly for the next session. That's a different story. But in the general fitness world of going to the gym or going to a class, you never have a feeling of going, that was a bad idea, because of the endorphin release you get and just how you feel. And that's one thing I always preach on what we're doing is it isn't necessarily the aesthetic, it's how it makes you feel after you exercise and during as well. So the Link Sport, I just thought to myself, like, why wouldn't I want to help people? Because this is why we got into the business. It wasn't, I say to people, if you get into the business to become a millionaire and to be rich, then you're in it for the wrong reasons. Automatically, it's flawed. But if you're in this to make sure you can help other people, that was why I joined Link Sport, because that's exactly what they wanted to do, was just help people.
Well, and be it, obviously you'll speak to the founders occasionally, and so will I, and I'll bring him in. I'll give him a little shout out on this episode, because he was talking about, oh, I'm feeling sore today, but I still need to do Marvin's workout. Yeah, but you've still got the accountability. It's he's not in the room. I didn't say this to him because ultimately he wanted to do it. I'm sore, but I want to take part because of the reasons you said of the community aspect of it. And I guess he gets the buzz from doing it with other people. It was being, I could cheat a little bit. I'll move the camera out the way. You probably would pick up on something like that anyway. So it's like, if you move it, no, move the camera lower so I can see all of the movement. Put it on the floor.
Exactly.
Things like that. So I think it brings a great all around thing that ultimately, the founders of the apps are willing to get involved into what they've created to ultimately, dry run it and test it themselves to experience it. for the better of it. And I think it was, for me, it was a no-brainer when they approached me, oh, do you want to get involved? It was through another athlete. It's like, I'll hear what you've got to say. Obviously COVID derailed what they originally wanted to do, with it doing it in person, and ultimately the restrictions would have probably put a limited on that as well, because if it's not in your household, you can't do it. So
I tried to arrange a run. I tried to arrange a run once, and I couldn't arrange the run because you weren't allowed to see more than 2 people at the time. But then now it's changed to 1, so it's kind of like that whole. But then they moved it to online, and even then, people are holding themselves accountable by knowing that it's available. So, and you just think to yourself, if you start in behaviors in the right place, when we are out of this pandemic, just imagine how big the community is going to be then. So sometimes things happen for a reason. Obviously, it's horrible that what's happening now, but everything does happen for a reason. And it's just what we do with that reason. We just have to find it.
Well, I think it's evolving and adapting to situations, because you raised a good point of, if you are always told yes, when you come approached with what is competition in one sense, and they're told no, how do you react? And ultimately, I did that as part of my TEDx talk of, most people view competition and comparison, but they blur the lines between what it is, because of ultimately the skill sets that are given to an athlete of, going at each other for constantly to become better, as athletes would put it. But from the outside looking in, they deem it as comparison, because it's I want to be just like so and so. Yeah, but is that competition or is that comparison? Is it because that person has something that you want and you don't currently have? I'm blurring the lines with the example I'm using, because it would determine where you look at it. But what I said in the TEDx talk is, because of that, what you mentioned of being always told yes. In other words, if we have this culture of giving out trophies for just turning up, which is yes in a different sense, any competition that individual faces in the future, they fold, because like, well, I'm used to be able to get my own way. How do I whereas you're 5 years old, 4 or 5 years older than me, we come from a generation, you need to fight for what you want. And pretty much your father and my parents have probably taken on board what their parents instilled with you. You've got to really fight for what you want.
You got to fight for it. Yeah, exactly. It's not a given.
Nobody's gonna. Well, nobody. I think, and I'm passionate about this, nobody has a right for anything. And I think when people are willing to look at it as black and white as that is, you are going to be successful, because ultimately, if nobody is like Kobe Bryant or Michael Jordan, and I wouldn't say you would want to be like that, because you need to be your own individual. But if you are as dedicated to that craft to do whatever it takes to get it to that level, and I'm going to outwork everybody else, you should, in theory, reap the reward. There's no guarantee that will happen, but ultimately that should occur and then go from there. But I think because of that blurriness between competition bad and emulating the beast that social media has become, I want to be this next big thing, next big artist, next big I hate the word social influencer, or the words that they use, because it's like, well,
social influencer, like,
it's
what
dangerous,
is
the word in itself. It's meaning you are in a sense manipulating people's thoughts because of your opinion based on one thing or the other. So when you do that, you speak to the kids of this generation, I want to be this, but why? And they can't answer you. So it's like, well,
they can't.
You need to answer that question and then I obviously can. I'll hear you out because you've got a reason as to what it could be get yourself out of a financial predicament that your family has always been into, which is ultimately the black narrative most of the time of I want to get my family out of the ghetto, and the only way to do it is through sport.
It's through sport, through entertainment. That's just something that we've been told, and that's all we've growing up. Obviously, we're similar age groups. That's all we saw. The success of black men, black women, what we saw was through sport and entertainment. So, and luckily, I grew up with a few people that were black and successful that weren't through those avenues. So that is like, here's a funny story, like kind of like related but non-related. Like my mum was a HR officer in Liverpool, but I didn't even know this until literally a few days ago. My mum was responsible for getting the first ever black employees in a Marks and Spencer's in Liverpool. Like, how nuts is it to even say that out loud, that in the generation of me being born, let's say 10, maybe 8 years later than that happening, she was responsible for black people being allowed to work in Marks and Spencer's. Like, that's just ludicrous. But the fact of the matter is, like you said, my mum, she got into a role where she never got help where she wanted to. So she found a role where she could give help. And that's where it's funny. My dad is a social worker. Like he's retired now. He's a social worker and a coach. And I thought to myself, I don't do what my parents do. We did completely different jobs. Actually, no. We've all chosen roles. And even I've ended up doing a role where I've ended up helping people. And it's been the best thing I've ever done in regards to work, because it doesn't feel like a job when all I'm getting told is I feel better about myself because of this and what you did. That's not a job to me, because you're helping people. It's the most rewarding thing that we can do.
Well, it's opening doors, and it's giving people opportunities that they might have never experienced. If I use a conversation I've had recently on Messenger with somebody, and they've had weight issues, and ultimately they said, "Oh, I've always felt like this." So I kind of question, well, has there been a time in your life where that hasn't been the case? They've said no. So okay, we've got some work to do, because you haven't always been big or bigger or overweight, or however we want to term it in a non-derogative term, because you weren't born like that.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's just that you have no recall of a good experience, and I think because of that is probably a good majority of people. It's I don't know, or I can't picture that. It's because inside there, and this is where psyche comes into, psychology for you and I comes into the fore. It's because people haven't got a success story to be able to imagine back to or recall, whereas you and I have got probably hundreds.
Yeah,
and sport alone, it's like, okay, let me just go back into my data bank and recall a happy moment of adversity, but I've overcome it.
Yeah,
and pretty much.
And it's funny. You go to the failure first sometimes. Like the adversity is from the failure to the success. It's never to the win. And that's what I say. I think that's one thing that athletes always carry, is the narrative that you've got to be a winner. Well, actually, most of the time you're losing. Yeah, like, and that's just how it is. But then it's what you do with the loss. You end up working harder on your craft, on getting better, or if you're in a team, working harder as a team, training better. But with what we're doing now as individuals, helping people individually, I'm always trying to help someone to help someone else. So whoever I've given a training system to, or something to help them, or my belief system and how you approach it mentally, I'm not just telling them what I'm making them tell that to their family. So I'm saying, what you learn with me, use this with everyone you know. Don't try and make them join your journey. Just let them know what you're doing, because people will notice. And when they notice, it's your job to tell them. Like this, it's not a case of hiding great information, because believe it or not, you know what it's like when you get successful in anything. A lot of people, they don't want to share how they got successful. And some people, there's actually a roadmap to it, but a lot of people don't want to like give you really the details. I've never been shy of telling someone, do you know what I did to do what I've done to get to now? How long have you got? Because it's going to take a while. Like, and that's what it is. It's going to take me a long time to tell you where it went wrong, where it went right, where it got better, and where I finally sat down and went, okay, this is it. I get it. Like, it's going now. I know how to do it. But ultimately, there's moments in it where I should have been celebrating success. But instead of celebrating it, what was I doing? I was like, no, it's not enough. I've got to, and that was the athlete mentality. It's not enough. I've got to do this. I got to do that. And like, that's a curse in itself because you're constantly striving for the next result. Whereas I think it was only the last probably 2 years, just pre-COVID, I went, you know what? My success is this. If I'm waking up happy and I'm waking up, that's my success because I know I'm driven. I've found my drive. So finding your drive is what's important. I think not having the drive and trying to create that is the struggle. I think that is the thing that people battle with is trying to find that motivation in themselves to be motivated. Whereas now, because I'm driven, I don't have to wake up feeling like, oh, there's something missing. I don't have anything missing because I'll be driven to do what would be missing because I'm doing it. So instead of talking about what I'm going to change, I just do it. I don't see the point of talking about it. I'm like, oh, this is what I'm going to do. I'm just doing it. Sometimes I'll say to my wife, she's like, what that thing you were talking about last week? I say, oh, I already started it because that's just how my brain works. I just have to, because I know action is the work that leads to the result. So that's what we do.
And obviously, we're coming to the good proportion of what I like to ask you a nice, difficult question now, Marvin. And I ask every guest this. If you had to sit down with any athlete, dead or alive for that matter, who would that be and why?
Wow. That's a tough. Do you know, no one's ever asked me that question before. That's a tough one. You've got me, you know. Just trying to think. It's tough, obviously, because I literally crossed paths with Kobe when I was 15 at a basketball camp because it was an invitational basketball camp, and everyone was saying, "Oh, there's Kobe Bryant. He's the best player in the country. He just came back from Europe. He's unbelievable." And like, I followed Kobe like his whole career, and I always watched his life after when he stopped playing basketball. I felt he did more for the world in basketball and for female basketball than what he ever did when he played sports, which I found was unbelievable. So he actually, before he passed away, he was on my like number one list to meet because I wanted to pick his brain and have an understanding of like the Mamba mentality, of the winning mentality, and like the being the person that's like relentless to find the success within what they're doing. Apparently he just was like, he was nuts with it. Like he just thought, and that's why they made all the funny commercials. So I guess it'd have to be Kobe Bryant. I think it'd have to be now, like, because even now I listen to some of his podcasts and I pick the gems. Sometimes he says something and I'm like, that's exactly what I needed to hear today because that's what I'm thinking. And it lets me know as well when someone who you think is a genius has a thought process and then you feel that, wow, that is my thought process. It allows me to realize that I'm in the right space myself. It's Kobe Bryant. Sorry, I ranted a bit there. Sorry.
That's all right, Marvin. And my final question before we wrap up the episode, if you had to summarize what we've been speaking about today into one sentence for people to take away, what would that be?
I'm going to get it. It's coming. Working hard isn't a privilege. It's a rite of passage.
So once again, Marvin, thanks again for coming on the Mindset Athlete podcast.
Thank you.
Thanks again for tuning in, and I hope you enjoyed this episode and got loads from it. Anything that was included and discussed will be available in the show notes below. And I would love to hear from you. Come and connect and ask your questions. I've been James Roberts from jamesowenroberts.com. Remember this quote by Chris Hart. An athlete is a mindset. It's how you prepare, think, and execute. not by some elite status or physical stature. Anybody can be an athlete.